The doctrine of America First is here to stay.
Has there ever been a slogan more vapid than America First? Like, how low IQ does your base have to be to talk in such simplistic terms?
As we've seen even in the first month of a new administration, America First's electoral popularity and strategic accomplishments ensure that it no longer belongs to a single party or politician.
The fuck do you mean? The America First movement is centered around Donald Trump now. It's more focused on single people and single parties than anything else before.
By successfully realigning U.S. foreign policy with the interests of the American people, America First is now positioned to guide our country through the trials and tribulations of the next generation.
I could talk about how stupid it is to assume that before this movement, American policy was just for the benefit of other people, but the MAGA hats literally believe that. They actually think there's this international conspiracy which they can use as a scapegoat for all of America's intrinsic problems.
Once unleashed, this doctrine has shown it won't easily be tossed aside. The American people demanded a part in the democratic process of formulating foreign policy. Once they got it, they won't ever let it go. Ever.
Yeah, but they never actually did get it, did they? Trump never actually got us out of any wars, and he tried to start a new one with Iran.
Previous administrations have tried to limit the American people's participation in deciding what kind of foreign policy this country should pursue. They delegated it to unelected technocrats.
I resent this description of America's bureaucracy as a technocracy. Technocracy implies competence. The US system is not.
And career bureaucrats, with the help of lobbyists and others with financial interests overseas.
Well, it's too bad Republicans are so opposed to ending money in politics.
The overclassification of government documents.
Oh, like the ones leaked by Edward Snowden, whom you still haven't pardoned?
The over-reliance on special operation forces.
Like the failed American coup attempt in Venezuela last year?
The overexpansion of new and overlapping federal agencies. And the over-politicized nature of intelligence all help to take national security off the table as a matter for democratic debate. There is still a group of foreign policy professionals who want to restore this old way of doing things. They tell us we can't understand the complicated issues, so they don't share all of the information with us. They tell us other countries will fail and fall if we don't send more U.S. troops. They tell us they can solve our problems by creating more government programs.
There it is, the conflation of being a war hawk with the left, despite the fact that the Republicans have traditionally been more hawkish on war issues.
And they tell us there will be another war in the Middle East if we move our embassy to Jerusalem.
Yeah, because Israel is a fascist dictatorship, violating international law to commit war crimes and violate human rights. If there was any globalist plot diverting resources away from America to serve moneyed interests, it's Zionism.
But they lie to us, and they think we don't see it. But fortunately for us, these so-called experts are not very creative or innovative. Try as they might, they won't take back control of the information, the budgeting, and the decision-making, because it is our right as voters to participate in this process. When I was first announced...
Blah, blah. I don't care about your personal anecdotes. This guy's just a grifter. He's just as much of a war hawk as the rest of the establishment. He's just using his audience's ignorance to advance his career.
For some reason, this was counterintuitive to all the experts, but not to the people.
What a lying demagogue. He knows the American public's basically illiterate in international issues. The idea that the voters know anything beyond basically a vague sense of war being bad allows him to do whatever the fuck he wants in terms of foreign policy and just say it's in the name of the people.
The lesson here is that the outsiders always have something to say, always something to contribute. Whether they're trying to make their voices heard in Washington, D.C., Brussels, or Sacramento. There are a few ways to leverage the contributions of outsiders. In America, I think there is a real value in seriously considering term limits for our elected officials.
Now, I don't have a strong opinion either way, but just remember that the reason why people talk about term limits was because FDR was so good of a president, Republicans had to do something to stop him.
Now, let me be clear. I sympathize with the counter-intellectual argument. The term limits constrain the public's freedom to vote for whomever they want. I get it. But the reality of our current political system should compel us to rethink how these intellectual justifications run counter to our lived experience. I believe the time has come to limit the terms for our House and Senate leaders.
Aren't you going to tell us what those lived experiences are?
Many who have become more ingrained in Washington and in the fabric of their own hometowns. And this is not a matter of concern for just Republicans, but it includes Democrats. This is a fight between the insiders and the outsiders, between Washington, D.C. and the rest of America. Of course, if things get really bad with elected officials, there's always the option to recall them. If you want the best case possible for a recall campaign, take a look at my home state of California. California used to be Reagan country, the shining example of business innovation and middle-class success. But now when you think of California, you think of out-of-control wildfires.
Because of climate change.
Of rolling blackouts.
Because of air conditioners during the heat wave. Because of climate change.
Schools still closed. Of shuttered businesses. Of bans on fracking.
Yeah, forget about the environment. Think of the needy oil billionaires. Fuck off. The idea that this guy cares about the American people is ridiculous.
And wealthy people jumping the vaccine line. Did you know that Gavin Newsom, the California governor, originally purchased $1 billion of masks and other protective equipment from a Chinese company, when American companies with the same equipment were based in California? In my 3 decades in American politics, I have never seen a better case for a recall than there is right now in California.
I actually kind of support the recall, but only because I think a progressive can win that seat.
And of course, if a public official is still failing to deliver on their promises, and if you can't limit their term or recall them in time, there's always one other option. You can run against them yourself.
True.